Hello and welcome to Child Development 152, Environmental Rating Scales. This course is, we actually have 4 different courses, Child Development 152A, B, C, and D. Each of those different letters represents a different type of rating scale. But the class is a combined course, which means that even though you signed up for one rating scale, either the 152A, which would be the environmental rating scales for preschool age children. It's called the ECHRS, EC, which you'll figure out here over the course of the class, the ECHRS, so we'll just call it the ECHRS. Then the 152B is the environmental rating scale for infants and toddlers, and those are children under the age of 3. Then we have Child Development 152C, which is family child care, so it's called the FECRS. You have to watch how you say that one. But FCCERS, and that's family child care, so that's somebody who's actually doing licensed family child care out of their home, and somebody who wants to do a rating scale and learn about the rating scale for that type of situation. And then we also have the last one is Child Development 152D, and the D section is for the school age, so the environmental rating scale for school age children. Now that is for before and after school care only. It is not it's not a rating scale for elementary school classrooms. It's for those groups that have, generally speaking, the kindergarten through 5th graders, that kind of thing, in a before and after school program that's generally speaking on an elementary school campus, but not always. So anyway, if you're listening to this audio video recording, it probably means that you've missed the orientation that we had sometime before the start of the school, before the start of the semester. If so, or you might be a student who actually attended the orientation and just wants to go back over and review the information that we covered. Either way, glad you're here. Okay, so a couple things I cover at the orientation. For one, we go over the syllabus. So attending the meetings, discussing how the course is set up and things along those lines. So if you have not already, please make sure that you print and read the syllabus. In the course, the only things, all of the assignments, all of the information is going to be presented through Blackboard. But if you've looked at the syllabus and everything, you'll see that we do have 4 discussion boards that you're responsible for. And within those discussion boards, there will be different questions that I ask. You will respond to those questions, and then you will, to my questions, you'll answer my questions, ask a couple questions of your own related to the topic, and then also respond to 2 students. At least 2 students within that discussion board. So that's what you'll be doing for all 4 discussion boards. There's handouts, there's information for each and every assignment that I'm discussing here in this orientation presentation, and everything is there on Blackboard. I guarantee it, I promise you, okay? We also have a discussion board. It's called the General Discussion Board. And you will use that general discussion board if you have any questions about the class. So I'm on Blackboard right now and I can't figure out how to get the video to work or something along those lines. So post that in the general discussion board. Then I check discussion boards almost every single day of the week during this 8-week course, or 6-week course, depending on if you're taking it during the summer or the fall or spring semesters. So I always check the discussion board posts. So I will answer your question, but if I just checked discussion board posts and you respond, you post something 5 minutes after I looked at it, I might not get back to you till the next day, some point in time. But you might have another classmate who is on Blackboard within an hour or half hour, and they see your post and they're actually able to respond to your questions. So that's what the general discussion board is used for. The other thing, if you have any specific questions about things like your grade or anything that's maybe outside of the class, for instance, something like I need a child development permit, those kinds of things, make sure you go ahead. Those are things you could email me. But everything else all the other questions related to the course should be posted on the general discussion board. If you do email me something that I think is a benefit to the other students to hear your question and my response, I will not answer you via email, but I'll tell you and I'll say, hey, could you please post this on the general discussion board? And then I'll be more than happy to answer your question there. So don't be surprised if you get something like that from me. Okay, so with that being said, let's talk about the environmental rating scale. When I say the environmental rating scale, I'm talking about all 4 sections of the class. So even though they have different environments that they are focused on, the rating scale is the same type of format for all 4 rating scales. So let's get started. Another quick thing that I always like to mention, you'll see that the YMCA Child Care Resource Service is noted here at the bottom. It was several years ago, and I was given the opportunity to go to an intensive 1-week training on the environmental rating scale. Now, at that point in time, I had taught this course once. I taught it in the fall, and they were offering the trainings in January. And so I was like, okay, this sounds like a good idea. 8 to 5, Monday through Friday for 1 week during January. It was right before school started, one semester. And I said, yeah, great, sign me up. I'm really into the environmental rating scale. I'm teaching the class and everything. I thought I knew about the rating scale. Well, oh my goodness, I went to that training and I feel like I knew nothing. I feel so sorry for those very first semester students who took me. So what we had is the YMCA actually had one of the authors, Debbie Cryer from the Environmental Rating Scales, come out and give us a training. I was like, whoa, this is great. She also brought her trainers with her. So I was, the first day we were at the YMCA, and it was a full 8-hour. It was, the full 8 to 5. They didn't feed us. They didn't do anything with us. It was like, you're on your own for lunch and meals and everything else. You're in the room, and this is the training that you're given, and that was pretty much it. It was kind of one of those things when I signed up, I was like, we'll probably be done by 3 or 4, be home by 5 if I'm lucky. Well, I was completely and totally wrong. The very first day we had training with the author and really got into it. And that very first night I went home and I read the textbook twice. I've read the Environmental Rating Scale book twice. And even though I was familiar with it, I noted in it, I highlighted it, I marked it up. So I felt like I was going to hopefully be ready for my observations. So what they did is they put us with a trainer. So myself and 2 other women and the trainer. All 4 of us were placed into a classroom. And it was a different classroom at a different center for the next 4 days, for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And we were there for the full time, even beyond the full time sometimes. Incredible training. We went to 4 different sites. We went to a for-profit center. We went to a state-funded center. We went to a college campus center, and faith-based, faith-based, for-profit, state-funded, college, and then faith-based nonprofit. So those were the 4 different centers we went to, and they were all down in the San Diego area. Nothing was up in the North County or in Palomar's district or anything like that. So they were all in the central part of San Diego. And with that, I found out that, oh my goodness, I have been doing this rating scale completely wrong, or not completely wrong, but not as well as I could have been doing. So with that being said, I completely changed and revamped the course, and have made changes each and every semester from here on out. So with that being said, that's why I'm using the YMCA. I've used this as a template. It's a great PowerPoint. They've got some great pictures and stuff on it. So I've used it. I, of course, have manipulated it over the course of the time. But that's why I'm using the YMCA Child Care Resource Service PowerPoint here. The other thing is I'll be mentioning the trainings that I went to and some of the things as we go through this orientation. Okay. let me see here. I should be able to click this. There we go. What is the environmental rating scale? It is an attempt to systematically and scientifically examine your environment. So it really goes through. The rating scale doesn't care about your opinion at all. Even though you're like, yeah, I know that my classroom usually does this, or yeah, I know that the teacher usually does this. It doesn't matter. If it didn't happen, if you don't see it, you don't count it. It's very, very specific and precise in some senses, in the sense that if it's a yes or a no sometimes, and it gives you all of these definitions. So it systematically and scientifically examines your environment. And that's what you want to do. You want to see, okay, what is the quality of my classroom, or of a classroom, and how you can rate that and then hopefully apply it someday to your own classroom. It's a tool to provide you with specific things that you can do right now to enhance your environment. So how can I change my environment to make it better, to make it a better quality program? And it's a way to promote a common definition of high quality environment. And that is so key here, high quality. That's what we're looking at. We want to make sure that every program that we work in and every program that we're associated with is a high quality program, or programs that we have our own children in. We want to make sure that they're high quality programs. That's what we should be giving to the children and to the families in our areas, or who are parts of our program and so forth. So high quality environment, that's what we're looking for. I'm going to tell you right now, there's no perfect center out there. So this is a scale, the rating scale is a scale of 1 to 7, so that we rate things on a scale of 1 to 7. And with that being said, no program, no classroom out there is a perfect 7. Okay, that's the first thing that they tell us about training. I'm like, okay. So I can guarantee that our centers here on campus, we score pretty high, but we are definitely not 7s. Okay, not 7s across the board, that means. Well, of course, we have some areas that we score 7s in, and you want to make sure that you got some areas you score 7s in. But there's some areas that we will not score 7s in due to the buildings, or to, for instance, things like the warm water, if we have accessibility to warm water for the children and so forth. Okay, so what we're looking for here is high quality programs, and that's what we all want to be. Basic needs of all children. So what the rating scale looks at, it looks at some different areas, and one is health and safety, and they really have a big emphasis on health and safety. I kind of already mentioned the warm water. Hand washing is a huge part of the environmental rating scale, okay? And hands have to be washed, in a certain way, of course, using soap, rubbing together for approximately 10 seconds, rinsing off, using a paper towel, all of those kinds of things. Well, and then children shouldn't be touching things before they go to sit down, like for instance, stay at the table to actually eat. So health and safety is a huge part of it. Hand washing is a huge part of it. And I'm going to tell you, I don't know if I've ever seen a classroom that scores above a 3 or a 5 on hand washing. I have to tell you, that's a really tough one. Building supportive, positive relationships. So what's the interactions between the children and the teachers, the children and the children, as well as the communication and language that is being used. Discipline and so forth falls under that category as well. And then active learning. So those are the curriculum areas. So what's going on in the art area, the math and science area, the manipulative area, and so forth, blocks, those kinds of things. So those are the areas that you're going to be looking at as you do a rating of a classroom. Oops, sorry. Okay, let's go back. Actually, let's go back here for a second. So what you're going to be doing, because we cover this when we go over the syllabus in class, so since we're not covering the syllabus, let's go back here for a second. And what you're going to be doing in this class is you're going to be doing one observation for one classroom for approximately 4 hours. So you only have one observation that you're responsible for. At that observation, you're going to be doing a rating scale. Okay, so you're going to you have a score sheet. You're going to use your textbook to figure out how the classroom rates. So plan on that. So you need a plan, and about maybe about a third of the way through the semester, a third to a half of the way through the semester, that's when you're going to be planning and actually going in to do an observation in a classroom setting. Now, this observation can be done in your own classroom. So if you are currently a teacher, I welcome you to go ahead and do it on your own classroom. The only drawback with doing it in your own classroom is that you cannot be responsible for the children in your classroom and do the observation at the same time. because it takes 100% of your effort and attention to do the actual observation and rating scale. So you cannot be responsible for the children at the same time. With that, you could have a substitute come in for you as you do the observation. Or you can go to another center. You can go to a center, any center down your street, wherever it might be. Or you can go to one of our lab schools on campus here in San Marcos or in Escondido, and both of our sites welcome students to come in and do the environmental rating scale. We have students every single semester that come in and rate our classrooms, and the teachers actually really do enjoy and like to hear about the feedback and so forth from those observations. So I'll kind of go over a little bit of Blackboard stuff at the very end of this PowerPoint presentation, and I'll show you kind of where to find that information is if you want to go to one of the lab schools on campus. So again, you can do your own classroom, you could do your own school. If you decide just to do a different classroom in your school, that's fine. You can go to a school or center down the street from yourself, or you can go to one of our lab schools. I have to tell you that I had two students who observed at the same school, and it was up here in this, in the North San Diego County area. And they really, really struggled last semester due to the fact that the classroom that they observed in had actual individual desks for preschoolers. So we're talking about 4-year-olds at a desk that you would see maybe in a first or second grade classroom. Totally inappropriate. They struggled because one student didn't know that it was really not appropriate to have this type of situation in a classroom, who actually ended up being a parent at the site. And so, so it was really, really difficult for her. And then another student who just didn't understand and didn't realize that this was not going to be a good situation. So what I warn my students now is at the orientation, if you walk into a classroom and you see individual desks, like 15 desks for children, I'm not talking about tables and chairs and things like that. I'm talking about individual desks for children. You might want to just walk out the door and say thank you and schedule an observation at either in a different classroom, maybe with a 3-year-old group or something like that. If you're doing the Eckers, if you're doing the infant toddler, I hope to goodness you're never going to see desks for infants and toddlers, those children under the age of 3. But if you're doing that preschool, that 3 to 5 group, you might want to see if there's maybe a younger set of children that you could do that does not have in a classroom that does not have tables and chairs for the children, or desks and chairs for the children, should I say. So you want to, if you see that, be aware, be concerned. It should set off red flags that might not necessarily be the best classroom to do an observation in. Okay, so hopefully we're on the same page here. Next, observation tips. So for the Eckers, the early childhood, which is the preschool group, the 3 to 5-year-olds, you really do need to write down a copy of the schedule first, or get a copy of the daily schedule. One of those two things. Schedules are extremely important, especially for the Eckers group. Not so much for the infant toddler or the family child care or the school age, but they're school age a little bit more so lately. But definitely for the Eckers, for the preschool age group, you need to get that schedule. Okay, so if you see it posted up there, you can write it down on your score sheet, and then you're going to write down what's planned and then also what you observe for the schedule. So that's something to do right away. Inventory materials as quickly as possible. So again, another tip that I give is to go, if you can go maybe a half hour before the children actually get into the classroom, something along those lines, or maybe stay a little bit after if children leave a program and so forth, stay a little bit after, and inventory the materials, which means what kind of books do they have, what are the books that they have, how many fantasy books do they have, how many people books do they have, how many ability books do they have in the classroom. So those things take some time, and it's not that they're not things that you need to really see children interacting with. Some of the, how many blocks are there in the block area? The types of blocks. Do they have other materials to go with the blocks? What's the cultural diversity in the classroom? Some of those things you can do inventory on and don't actually need to see the children interacting with. And then try to take advantage of temporal opportunities. Temporal opportunities means those things like when the children are outside, go outside with them. Then you can observe the outside time. When they're inside, of course, do the inside. If it's a meal or snack, meal, breakfast, lunch, or snack time, then make sure that you note and focus on those items on your score sheet when those things are taking place. Okay? Hand washing too. That's the other thing, if they're hand washing before and after meals. Okay. Next, interview. You will do an interview with the teacher. You'll notice that in your textbook there are example questions that you can ask the teacher after your observation. And ideally, the best situation is if you do your observation, you're not going to be sitting there marking off your yes and no's on your score sheet when you're there in the classroom. You're going to do that when you get home, hopefully the same day, because it's fresh in your head. After you do mark off as many yes and no's as you can on your score sheet, looking at your textbook and maybe even going back to the recommended textbooks for the All About books, which are on reserve in the library. I have copies of them too, so if you have any questions about that, you can always, of course, ask on the general discussion board. But you do need some time to interview. Now, interviewing time can take place, you can either do it over the phone, you could do it in person, or you could do it via email. Whichever way you do it is fine with me. You're only going to ask a question to determine a higher score. I forget how many questions there are. I think there's like 100 questions or something like that, 80 questions in the textbook. And I actually had a student one time ask the teacher every single question. I'm like, oh my goodness, that teacher must have had the patience of a saint. I don't know. But do not ask every question. Generally speaking, you are going to ask questions only that, of course, lead to a higher question. They should be the ones in the textbook. They should not be like, why did you get into teaching? Or how long have you been a teacher? Because those are not ones in the textbook and they don't have anything to do with the scores of the environmental rating scale. Try not to ask leading questions, and then, like I said, use the sample questions. It takes about 20 to 30 minutes, give or take. On average, I'd say for most students, ask probably 10 to 15 questions at the most, okay? All right. In-class activities. I have an in-class activity, so you're missing that out on this opportunity, but I ask you how you can balance 9 nails on the top of 1 nail. So if you haven't seen that, you might want to check into it. But anyway, basically it's an activity that kind of makes students feel a little uncomfortable because it's unless you know how to do it, you really can't figure it out. So after trying it, how does it feel? Of course, it feels very frustrating because you don't understand it. And then after I show people how to do it and you understand it, then it's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that makes sense. But I had no clue as to how you can balance 9 nails on the top of one head, the top of the head of 1 nail. So when I do this activity, I explain how sometimes you feel uncomfortable at first with something, and then once you know how to do it, then you feel like, oh, yeah, sure, I can do that again and again and again. So the reason why I do that is because you are probably going to feel a little bit uncomfortable in this class, in the sense that you're like, okay, the rating scale, I'm not familiar with it. I don't understand it completely. I don't expect you to be 100%, have a 100% understanding of the rating scale when you take this class. This is basically an introduction to the rating scale. So you're not going to be perfect your first time out, and I don't expect perfection. What I expect is that you read and understand you read your textbook, that you go over the assignment sheets, you follow the directions, you read and listen to all the lectures, and so forth, and then you apply what you've learned to an observation. I give you tons of resources and all the information that you need for that. But know that when you go and you do out your observation, you're going to be flipping back and forth in your book and on your score sheet, and it is going to feel a little uncomfortable, especially at first. And then usually by the time you get through your 3 hours of your 4-hour observation, you're like, okay, I think I'm kind of getting the hang of this. And I want you to know that it takes about 10 times before you're really going to start to feel comfortable with this. So 10 different observations in 10 different classrooms before you really get a handle and go, okay, I feel comfortable with the environmental rating scale now. Okay, so just know that. The next thing that I do, yeah, it feels a little confusing to understand it and so forth, but once you learn it, I guarantee you it'll be easy. Okay, how to score. A couple things. One, you need to read your entire rating scale, so your textbook, at least twice. I say twice, yes, I mean twice. Okay, it's really important to read it a couple times because that helps you go, okay, yeah, I remember seeing that, or yeah, I remember something about that. You try to answer the easy and time-sensitive questions first. Like I said, some of those things like inventories and when children are hand washing or doing a meal. Score based only on the current situations. So like I said before, if you see a teacher and you're like, oh, I know that teacher always does that, or I know that teacher never does something like that. Well, you have to base it on the current situation, and you have to base your score on what you saw on that day. So for instance, I give the example of a student was observing over at one of our classrooms at the lab school, and when they went in to do their observation, the teacher in the morning had taken down the dramatic play items and had planned on replacing them. Well, she had gotten delayed. She had gotten called off that duty, that task, and because something else had come up. I forget exactly what it was. I think it was maybe a toilet issue or something along those lines. And she never got back to putting up the new materials for the dramatic play. And that happened to be the same day that the student came in to do an observation. And the student's like, yeah, when as I was reading and going over her rating scale, I was like, wow, the teacher had no dramatic play that day? I was like, wow, I'm just really shocked. So I actually, since it's one of our teachers, I called up and I said, hey, what happened on this day with dramatic play? And then she told me the story. I'm like, oh, that was the day. Okay, well, I understand. So, the teacher scored a 1 for dramatic play on that day. Again, it's not the it's not the normal situation, but it was based on the current situation. So you have to score that way. Always begin your way at 1 and work your way up. And if you're observing in your classroom, do not change your environment based on what the environmental rating scale says you should do. Ideally is that you go in, you do your observation, and then you make your changes. Okay, because you kind of want to see where you're at and now where you're going. So for instance, there might be something that you score, there's a no in a 3 category, and that kind of shoots down your whole. For instance, like I give an example of stuffed animals. Like, oh, if I just add stuffed animals to my classroom, I could go from this score to this score. I could go from a 3 or a 5 to a 7, just by adding that one, by adding some of those items to my classroom. So do that, rate yourself first, and then make the changes. Okay, the environmental rating scale uses a 1 to 7 point scale. There's one really difficult thing to understand about the rating scale when it comes to scoring the ones. Okay, why they did this, I really don't know, but it's really, really confusing. And let me pull out my book here real quick. The ones are written in the negative, which can be really confusing, especially for people. So let me give you an example. For instance, music and movement is one of the items. And the first one, it says 1.1, and it says no music movement experiences for children. So you see how the ones are written in the negative? It says no music movement experiences for children. Remember math class where you have a negative and a negative equals a positive? So for instance, if you say no music and movement experiences for children, you say no, there are no music and movement experiences for children. So there's a negative and there's a no negative, which equals a positive. So that means you would score a yes on that. If you have a negative question and a negative answer, which is no, it's a good thing. You have a positive. Okay? So then you can move on. So this is all for all the ones. So if you have, so for instance, let me go back. If you have no music and movement experiences, correct, there are no music and movement experiences. Sorry. Now I'm confusing myself. See, it goes back. the thing about the ones is that a yes score is a negative thing. Okay, so that's what I mean. No music and movement experiences. No, there are no music and movement experiences. It's a positive, which means it would be scored a yes. Okay? If you have a negative question, no music and movement experiences. Yes, there are music and movement experiences. So that means you would have a no, because you have a negative plus a positive is a negative. So therefore, that's a negative answer. So in other words, if there are music and movement experiences in a classroom, yes, there are music and movement experiences in a classroom, you want to mark that a no, because the no's and the ones are a good thing. Okay? And the yeses in the ones are a bad thing. Okay, that's a negative score. For the 3s, the 5s, and the 7s, the 3s, yeses are good, no's are bad, negative. Okay, same thing with the 5s. Yeses are good, no's are bad. 7s, yeses are good, no's are bad. But in the 1s, if you get a yes, that's a negative answer. Okay? All right. Try not to let your feelings about your program or the program that you're observing influence you. So like, oh, I know that, yeah, she normally does this or he normally does this. So you can't just say, oh yeah, I'm going to mark a yes, I'm going to give a positive score, when in all reality you have to mark a no. 7s are extremely rare. Same thing with 1s are extremely rare, except in the category of health and safety and items involving hand washing. Okay. So in other words, you should not be scoring 7 on all your items. There is no classroom or center that is perfect. So if I see a score sheet that has all 7s, it sends off red flags to me, because I know that you just did not score it accurately, that you really did not take your time to do this accurately, because there's a program out there that is not completely perfect. Okay? Ideally is to get average of 5s, 5 and 6s. That's if you get averages of 5s and 6s, you're on the right track, you're positive, you're going in the right place. Okay? If you have averages that are under 5, meaning you have scores all over the place, but you add them all up and divide them by the total number and you have an average, if you have that and it's lower than a 5, that might be some areas that, like, okay, what do I need to work on to improve my quality? The centers that we observed at, a couple of them scored in the averaged in the 2s. One scored in the 1s, averaged in the 1s, and the other one scored in the, I think it was the 3s or the 4s. And the center that scored in the 4s, the highest one that we observed, 3s or 4s, I forget, it was actually the program that kind of looked more run down, if you want to call it. It was a state-funded program. Didn't necessarily have, the nicest, newest center, classroom materials and so forth, but it was really good. It was really good compared to the other ones, that's for sure. The center that actually looked the best, that parents might be going, wow, this is new, this is nice, they're the ones who scored the lowest in the 1s. So, looks can be deceiving when it comes to quality sometimes. All right, do the practice score sheet. So we do this activity in class. And in order to do this activity, let me show you real quick. I'm just going to end this show here real quick, and I'm going to pop this up. This is the score sheet. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to look at these different areas, and you're going to do practice. So for instance, you see here there's no, 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 no. Remember, the no's and the 1s are a positive thing. So that means we can go on to the 3s, and we can look at the 3s. And over here we can see that 3s here are all positive. Those are all yes scores. But over here, 3.4 is negative. So I'm going to show you a way that how we figure this out, how we actually are going to score this in just a second. You have to look here, 3.5, oops, 3.5 right here. Let's see if I can get this other one over here. I don't know. You can see right here it's checked. It's that one right there. I don't know if I can do that. Where are my arrows pointing right now? It's an NA, and so NAs don't count. They're not applicable. Do not count. And sorry, I got distracted for a second. Do not count, so they're not part of your part of the score. So, and then you can see over here all the 5s are all positive and the 7s are 7s are actually positive, but I'm not able to highlight the 7s over there. Okay, so with that being said, we see that 3.4 has a no. So how are we going to score that? All right, let me go over here. Okay. Okay, sorry about that. I had to pause. I actually had to go to a meeting in the middle of my day here. So I thought I'd be able to get this done before the time of my meeting, but I wasn't. So anyway, I'm sorry. I apologize for the long pause. And now I'm getting my brain back into it. Okay, so this information here on the scale, it says, which one do I circle? When we go back to our score sheet, and I'm going to have to keep going back and forth here. Let me go back. I'm going to have to go back and forth here and end the show and come back to the, let's see if I can do it. Maybe I can pull it up. Oh, I can. Yay. Go back and forth here for a minute. So which one do I circle? We look at this and we have, like I said, we have all the no's in the ones. So if I go back over here, let's see if I can get this to work just right. Sorry about that. Let me go back. There we go. It says if any item under the ones is scored yes. Yes is negative for the ones. Remember that? So on my practice score sheet, I know that there are, sorry, I'm trying to figure out how I can keep pulling this. Nuts. Oh, there we go. Keeps, for some reason, okay, now it goes up where I can actually get the score sheet. And I might just maybe make it a little bit smaller here for a second, and so I can, if I click off of it, it disappeared. I knew it. Technology. So anyway, we noticed that on the score sheet, on here within the orientation PowerPoint information, under that PowerPoint information there is the practice score sheet. So hopefully you've actually gone through and printed that out so you can see it, unlike me that I have to keep going back and forth to it. Okay, hopefully you printed it and you've got it in front of you right now. If not, pause me, go back, do that, and then catch up to it again. I'm at like 36 or 37 minutes right now, so if you need to go on that little scale, that's about where I'm at. Okay, so if you've got that printed out, then this will make a lot more sense instead of me just flipping back and forth. But we saw that on that first area with the furnishings and so forth, that we were looking at that item, and all the ones were scored no's, so that's a good thing. Now we can move on to number 2's. If all items under 1 are scored no and at least half of the items under 3 are scored yes. When we looked at the 3, remember 3.4 was scored no, but 3.1, 3.2, and 3.3 were all scored yes. So we have at least 50%. Okay, so on your score sheet, we know that we have at least all the ones are no's and at least half the items are marked yes on the 3's. So 2's looking good right now. If we go over here to number 3, to 3's, if all items under 1 are scored no and all items under 3 are scored yes, okay, we don't have that because we have 3.4 is no. So which one do I circle? I circle that 2 because of 3.4. Okay, so let me go back to, let me see if I can pull that up without, I don't know why if I go here, if I can, if I have to stop, I have to stop the slideshow, I think, and then I can access it. So let me just stop the slideshow here for a second, and now I can go back and forth to it rather easily. Sorry about that. Technology, I always have to figure it out here. Okay, so what I would do is up here, on that 2, I would circle the 2 because these are all no's, those are all positive, 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 negative score. So I can't circle a 3 because not all the yeses, all the yeses in the 3 category are not, all of the items in the 3 category are not yeses. So I can't score to 3. Even though all the 5s are yeses and all the 7s are yeses, it's still a 2. I have to circle the 2 because of that 3.4. So this goes to show how one little thing in a classroom sometimes. So if I would fix 3.4 for indoor space, and if I look, now I'm just looking at the Eckers right now, but it counts for all of them. 3.4 is space is reasonably clean and well maintained. So something about that classroom was not reasonably clean or daily maintained. Maybe things like maybe the floor was not swept or mopped, or a big mess, maybe a juice spill was just left and it was really sticky and everything else. So that would be a no. If I fix that and I mopped on a daily basis and I clean the classroom, I could fix that and I could have a 7. That score could go from a 2 to a 7 very easily. See how that makes sense? Okay, so let's go back over here. Let's go to number 2. And number 2, we have no. 1.1 is a no, but 1.2 is a yes. If we look on our sheet over here, we'll see that if any item under 1 is scored yes, you have to circle the yes. That equals a 1. Okay? So you cannot get any higher than a 1 for this category because of this 1.2. You'll also see that there are other negative scores here and here, but that doesn't matter. You just start at the 1s and you work your way through. And right now we have 1.2 as a yes. The other thing too is, though, you can see that all items are scored here. So all the 1s, all the 3s, all the 5s, all the 7s, whether they're a positive score or a negative score, they're all scored. That's really extremely important. You have to score, you have to mark a yes or no for each of these areas for the entire rating scale. So just because you get a negative score and you know where you think you're going to be circling doesn't mean that you stop scoring. For the purposes of this class, you're going to score everything. Okay? All right. Then, okay, let's go back over here. If we look at 3, we see no's and the 1s. That's a good thing. 3s have yeses. 5s have yeses. Oops. 5s have yeses. 7s have no's. Okay, so when do we get to this situation? So it's looking pretty good, at least for a 5. But how would we know if we get to that 6? We go back to that 50% rule. So if we had 50% of the 7s marked yes, we could score it a 6. So for instance, if 7.1 was scored yes and 7.2 was scored no, we could circle a 6. Right now we don't have 50%, so therefore the score for this is a 5. Okay? So what I usually do in class is then I have the students continue on with the next 7 areas. We discuss them. So for you, there's an answer sheet on Blackboard that tells you whether it was a yes or no. And this is I just kind of get you introduced to this concept of scoring and so forth. At the orientation, like I said, you're not going to feel that comfortable with it, like that whole nail balancing, 9 nails balancing on the 1 nail. You're not going to feel 100% comfortable with it. I get it. I understand it. It's just an introduction, and we're going to go over this in more depth throughout the class, okay? Through the assignments that you're going to be doing and so forth, okay? So if you want to go ahead, look at them, you could pause it right now, figure out what it is that each of these areas score. So if you want to just go ahead and pause me here real quick, we could go ahead and do that right now. If you want to pause it. If not, you're going to just go ahead and hear all the answers. So when we look at, so pause it now if you don't want to hear the answers. All right, now we're going to get back to it. 4's, this area here for 4 ends up scoring a 1 because we don't have 50% over here. We have 3.1 and 3.3 are no's. Remember, NAs don't count, so they're not a positive or negative thing. So we only have 33% scored positive, so we cannot give that a 2. So this score for 4 is a 1. For 5, space for privacy, we get a score at a 7 because everything on there is perfect. When it comes over here to number 6 at the top for child-related display, we can see that it's going to be a 3 because we don't have 50% here in those 5s. We only have, again, 1 yes and 2 no's. When we look at 7, we look through here, and it looks like we're good with the 5s. Again, we're going to be scoring that one a 5 because we have 2 over here that are no's and only 1 yes. So we cannot score it a 6. It would be a 5. 8, gross motor equipment, we have all positive scores here, positive scores here, positive scores here, positive scores here. Remember, NA doesn't count, so yay, we got a 7. Number 9, we have positive scores here, positive scores here, positive scores here, and then the NAs don't count, so we're not going to worry about those. We have a positive and a negative, so we got at least 50%, so this one actually gets to, not a 5, but it's a 6. I'm trying to move my little highlighter thing is not working, but a 6 for number 9. Hopefully you got a 6 for number 9. Last but not least, let's look at 10. We've got all positive scores here, positive scores here. 3.4 is our negative. And if we look over, we have positive here and positive here. So some of you might have said a 6, but in all reality, this is a 2, okay? Because of that 3.4. If you missed 3.4, that's where it makes it a 2. So hopefully that just gives you a little introduction. Again, we're going to go over it more in the class as time goes on. But for now, the other thing, let me start this again. This information is here on this PowerPoint. Again, it's in your textbook, and we'll be discussing it many times throughout the class. Okay, how to use a scale before you're evaluating in a classroom. You want to read your scale book, your textbook, at least twice. Practice using the rating scale first, that practice score sheet, which we just did. If you need more time at it, definitely take your time with it. You're going to need at least 4 hours for your observation and at least 20 to 30 minutes for an interview. Again, that could be done on the phone, in person, or via email. And your 4-hour observation, that's a minimum that you need to do for the class. I know your textbook says 3, but I say 4. It's your first time out with this. You need at least 4 hours. Students sometimes say, oh, can I stay longer? I had a student actually went in for a day and a half. I'm like, no, that's way too long. Okay, 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours at the most, but nothing over that, okay? You need to figure out how to do this in the 4-hour time period because it's definitely doable within that. You have to make sure that you keep your textbook with you the whole time and available. Ideally, you need a clipboard, something to write on when you're doing it because you don't know exactly where you're going to be at in the classroom. You need a clipboard, you need to have your textbook, and you need to have a copy of your score sheet. Pencils are what you need to do to record all of your information, and that's what you're going to be turning into me. I want to see your sloppy handwritten notes, okay? I don't want to see nice, neat, rewritten work because if you do that, generally speaking, students summarize instead of writing specific observations, and I want specific observations, not a summary, okay? Do not talk to or interrupt the staff. Be like a fly on the wall. If the child comes up to you and says, what are you doing? What you doing? Just say, oh, I'm doing my homework right now. And then you don't pay attention to them. I know that's really hard. And then they'll think that you're not fun. So they'll move on and get back to their own work. Yeah, you need to basically be a fly on the wall. I've had some times where a couple times, one student I actually had where a teacher left her alone in the classroom with the children. It was in a faith-based program, and she went to attend a funeral that was going on at the church that was attached to the school, and it was totally inappropriate. That is completely against licensing rules and regulations. Do not ever let yourself get put into a situation like that. You need to leave the classroom before the teacher does and say, I'm sorry, but I am not allowed to be in here in the classroom with the children alone. I'm sorry. And and just apologize and leave. But that is not your responsibility at all. So don't allow that to happen. Sometimes teachers like to talk to somebody new in the classroom, and it would be extremely difficult for you to get your job done if you're sitting there talking to the teacher. So again, you might just want to excuse yourself and say, oh, I'm so sorry, but I have to do a lot of notes. My teacher makes me take a lot of notes for this class, so I really have to focus on what I'm writing. Blame it on me, something along those lines, okay, if you have to. All right, write down on the score sheet while you're observing. Your score sheet should be covered with notes front to back. I give you examples of what notes pages should look like. So you should, and again, that's on Blackboard, and you'll have no problem taking a look at that as the course goes on. How to use a rating scale, again, based on the current situation, not future plans. We've pretty much covered all of this. Use a pencil during your observation, so that's really important. The rest of these things we've covered about the 50% rule and so forth. Accessible means that the children can actually reach and use the materials. So if it's on an open shelf and the children, it's at the child height level, that's probably accessible. If it's something that's in a cabinet or cupboard or storage that's put away behind closed doors, that's probably not accessible. So be aware of that. Adults are the ones directly involved with the children, the teaching staff. So for instance, if a director comes in to give a break, that director can be counted in that classroom at that point in time. But if the director's doing work at their desk or in a different office and so forth, then they're not considered the staff that are working with the children. And for the Eckers part, you'll learn about substantial portion of the day, which is extremely important. And again, we'll go into the more depth in that as we get to that section of this course. Okay, key or weighted items. So as I've talked about hand washing, that's a big thing. They believe hand washing is extremely important. So do I. We have to wash the germs away. So for instance, hand sanitizer does not work in this situation. One of the classrooms that we observed on our training, the teacher actually before lunch, she went around with a bottle of hand sanitizer and gave a squirt to each child, and that did not count. It doesn't count. Hand sanitizer is a great thing to use at a time maybe when you're away from the center, like if you're on a picnic or away from bathrooms, things like that. Then you could use that hand sanitizer, but that's not your go-to when you actually have water accessible to the children and hand washing accessible. Accessibility, again, is another weighted item. Free play, so kind of giving that idea when the classroom that was set up with those individual desks and chairs did not have a lot of free play time because children were basically, sitting at a desk or a table and they were doing worksheets. That's not considered a quality program when it comes to children 0 to age 5. The other thing you might want to be aware of more of those things like transitional kindergarten classrooms, those TK programs, usually on an elementary school site. But with those, you again want to be aware that they might not be an appropriate program to observe in for an environmental rating scale, or that they might just score really low. So again, be aware of that. And again, substantial portion of the day for the Eckers people. Some difficult issues. So for instance, respect, process versus product, that's when it comes to artwork, space for privacy, child size furnishings. Just because it's small, we go over this in the face-to-face orientation. Just because something is small does not mean it's child size. For instance, if you've ever sat at a table where it's kind of come up to almost to your neck, okay, that's not appropriate sized. So when you get to that item in the environmental rating scale, you'll see, and we'll talk about, and I'll discuss it more as to what child size means. Appropriate hand washing, if a child just basically gets their hands wet under the water, not appropriate hand washing. Diversity, supervision, discipline, and interactions. Those are some things these are the areas that sometimes students struggle with scoring because you really have to look at them when you are there in the classroom. They're not hard, they're just a little bit more difficult, okay? They're not impossible, let me put it that way. Curriculum areas, these are the areas that you would be looking at when you're doing there. So like I said, when you're taking those inventory, I'm sorry, my TH got cut off here for math, but when you're looking at the inventory of the classroom, these are the areas that you're going to be focusing on. Okay, so I think that's it for that slideshow. I'm going to close this down. I'm going to minimize it right now. Let's go to Blackboard real quick. So you will see over here that there is information for you. The most important thing is the class information and the syllabus, the orientation information. That's where you found this and so forth. The course materials you'll only find one folder there for your course materials. So be aware of that. You're not going to find a whole lot of information there. You're going to find one folder, that whichever course you signed up for. So if you signed up for the A, the B, the C, or the D, that's the folder you will find. And within that folder, if I turn this off, you don't have a little on-off switch like I do. But if I turn that off and I go here to they're all basically the same format, and they all have the same information, but the lecture notes are different, okay? And when it comes to the lecture notes, you'll get lectures similar to what I'm doing here today on this orientation. The most important one for all of them is number 4. That's where you're going to see multiple lectures, because it goes into, I go over the entire rating scale that's specific to that course, to either the early childhood, the infant toddler, or the family child care or school age. Here is where you'll find information. There's a video assignment. You'll watch the video here. All of my assignments have detailed handouts, basically, that will tell you exactly what you are responsible for that assignment. So what you're going to do is you're going to print out this workbook for this assignment, and then you're going to watch the video. You're going to follow along with the workbook, okay? And I give you the little reminder as to how the yeses and nos are written. Let me go back here, sorry. The rating scale information, rating scale score sheet information, this is where you're going to find your information for your assignment. And this is the 100-point assignment. This is where you're going to go do your observation. So I give you all of the information here you need in order to be successful with this assignment. Okay, in addition, of course, to the lectures and so forth. So the last thing, and again, you're going to just have to click through here and read through everything, okay, at different points in time. I'll keep you on track with the syllabus, all right? I'll tell you what you should be doing, when you should be doing it, so you don't have to like go, oh my gosh, I got to go do it all today. No, don't worry. We're going to be doing it over the course of the entire class. And then last but not least is a self-study change paper. So this is after you do your observation, and then you're going to check out the self-study change paper, and you're going to basically say what worked really well in the classroom and what needs improvement, okay? Make sure you cover all of these areas when you do that self-study change paper. It's really important in order to at least be able to earn your full points. The other thing too is that we do have a mid-semester class meeting, so it's one of those things that it'll be on a different day and time depending on which semester you're taking this course, but I'll let you know, of course, through the syllabus and through the announcements and so forth. Okay, the last but not least here is the discussion board, and this is where you will make all your posts for a discussion board. Okay, if you're not sure about how to do that, you click on the general discussion board, and then if you have a question to ask, go ahead and you click create a thread, and then you're able to put a title here and type out your response and hit submit. Of course, I'm not going to hit submit today with my gibberish there. Okay, and this is how you can also, if in order to read somebody's response, you click on that little green spot, and this is how do you actually post on the discussion board. Okay, when you're done, click OK. All right, I think that's it. Let me know if you have any more questions. I'll be more than happy to answer them for you, again, through this general discussion board or through email if it's something more specific and personal. All right, thank you so much. Have a great day.